Welcome to Art Talk Tuesday yet again. That's how you know it's Tuesday. There's always an art talk with an awesome artist. And today I'm so excited because we have Jenna Rainey coming on. And Jenna was actually referred to me by someone who follows me, and she follow this girl. She's a lot like you, and I checked out her stuff, and I was like, yeah, we have a lot in common. So I'm so excited to talk to her about all things art and just about artist stuff that we usually talk to. It says she's adding right now. Jenna, if it's adding you, just make sure your phone's screen rotator lock is off. That way you can rotate your phone to the horizontal. For some reason, Facebook is just like that, and they won't let you add if you don't do. Let's see. It is still adding. Let me see if I can pull it up here on my computer. Let's see. Facebook. So yeah, what's new, guys? Okay, here we go. We'll try this again. Okay, approving. Okay. Let's try this again. Approve. Okay, let's try it again. Sometimes it takes 2 times to try. It says adding.
Hello. Oh my gosh.
Hi.
Technology.
Hi. I know it's Facebook too. You would think Facebook would be like the
right.
way ahead of the curve. I'm so excited to.
You
like
too.
I was saying, someone referred me to you, and it was like, hey, you should check out this girl. She's doing a lot of the same things you're doing, and a lot of your posts on Instagram are very like inspirational, motivational, and about like art business, which is exactly the stuff that I love to talk about. So I'm so excited just to really meet you.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So if you could just kind of start by introducing yourself, maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into art.
Yeah. Sure. Sorry, I'm getting echo. It's like replaying the beginning of the video. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Whoa.
now it's gone. Let me just plug my headphones back in. Okay. No more echo. It was like replaying the beginning of the video when you were talking and asking the question. So we're here. We're good. Technology woes.
Yeah.
So my backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I, like you, am an artist and a business owner. I've been a business owner for almost 8 years and have been doing art full-time for about 8 years. But I went to school for psychology. I got my degree in psychology and was planning on going back to school and becoming a therapist and doing something like music therapy because I was also a piano major for a year and then I switched anyway. So I don't have a degree or I don't have a background in art or anything. Didn't go to design school. And I get that question a lot, as I'm sure you do too. You went to design school and art school because it's kind of this thing that artists feel kind of hesitant in a way. Like, I'm not qualified enough to be doing this full time. I have to have this degree or this experience. And I don't have that experience at all. I didn't go to business school or art school. I went to school and studied psychology. And I went to school in Chicago where I met my husband. And so we spent a few years there. And after I graduated, moved back after a few years, spending a few years in the city, moved back to Southern California where I'm from. And I went from basically waiting tables at a bar in Chicago while I was putting myself through school and moved up in the world and got an office job as an administrative assistant in a financial planning office. So it was definitely not at all what I was experienced in whatsoever. I was there for a total of about 4 months, but in between our move, some of our stuff like got mixed up with somebody else's stuff. One of their boxes, which we don't know who the actual owner is, was full of art supplies. It was like watercolor, paintbrushes, calligraphy pens, and nibs and stuff. And that I contribute to my career. My entire career is based off of this one box because it became like my therapy. I hated my day job and my commute was really long to the financial planning office, and I would just come home and bust open that box of art supplies that wasn't mine and nobody claimed it, so I could open it. But anyway, I'd just stay up really late every single night and painting it, and eventually started posting my work on Instagram about 8 years ago, and it just kind of snowballed from there, and I was able to quit my financial planning job after 4 months of being there, and I definitely quit way too early and didn't have any money saved up and started my business. And I've been doing everything from starting off as a wedding stationer and graphic designer to writing watercolor how-to books, and now doing licensing and working on products for retailers and manufacturers. So it's kind of been this crazy roller coaster ride of many different twists and turns. But yeah, education, I definitely attribute a lot of my passion for teaching to my degree in psychology because of just being able to understand human behavior a little bit. And that's really all it takes when you're teaching, is being able to meet people where they're at, and then also knowing the skill that you're teaching a little bit better than they would know. So anyway, I don't remember what the initial question was.
No, you're great. You
answered it.
You answered it. You for sure answered it. Yeah, and I love it. I think you do have a certain leg up, basically, with having a psychology degree and understanding how people think, especially in the coaching business too. You can, you understand where they're coming from, which is just huge. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So when do you think? So you mentioned you quit your job a little too early. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe talk about like what was the tipping point between hobby and professional artist?
Yeah, so for me, I didn't have this aha moment or this like, oh, I can now become a professional artist, or I'm qualified enough to call myself a professional artist. I feel like I was just so naive. I was 22, 23 at the time, when I was getting into art and starting to post online and starting to take on clients. And I took on clients before I had a contract, before I knew what I should charge, before I knew who even the competition was. I didn't know anything about the market whatsoever. I just was getting asked to design people's wedding stationery at the time. And I had also never opened an Adobe program in my life and didn't have a scanner. I was taking stuff to Kinko's and getting it printed at Kinko's. And anyway, so I never really had this like decision or moment where I decided to, move myself mentally from being a hobby artist to a professional artist. It was just kind of like this thing that snowballed and kept building from there. And like I said, it was about 4 months after we moved from Chicago back home to Southern California, and 4 months after that, and then also 4 months after I started my job at the financial planning office. And basically just quit and went full time because I was so miserable at my day job. I absolutely hated it. It was completely soul sucking. And some people, like, they can totally deal with the 9-to-5 cube life, and that's amazing. And I'm grateful for those people because we need them. But for me, it was completely soul sucking. And like I said, I was very naive when I made the jump from doing this as a side hustle to full-time artist, because it took a few years for me to start to actually make a profit from it in my business. It was all just learning from mistakes and putting the money back in the business and eating costs on things because I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, I would say it took about 4 to 5 months for me to just make that transition. And looking back, it's pretty crazy. I'm glad it went that way, and it was really painful at first with all the mistakes that I had to make because of how naive I was. But I'm really grateful for that, because had I been like more hesitant in going full time and calling myself a professional artist, I don't think I would have the business that I do today, and I probably wouldn't even have this career. So I'm grateful that I was naive in a way. And yeah, it just took about 4 months, but again, lots of mistakes and a very long road after that decision.
For sure. So when did you start coaching? Or you have a course available, right?
Yeah, so I have a few courses. Over the past, probably since about 5 years ago, I've taught various online courses through other people's websites like Brit & Co. and Skillshare and all that kind of stuff. And then last year, I think, I launched my first masterclass basically called Pen to Press, which basically takes people from pen to learning how to set up files for letterpress and foil and digital and doing the whole custom stationery thing and working with clients. I launched that in January, and then I also launched another course this past September called Brand Plus Brand, which basically walks artists through the whole business plan and business model of licensing and working with brands and products and brand collaboration. So 2 different kind of venues for artists to make money. But I've had those for the last almost a year. But I have been teaching in-person workshops and online courses for about 5 to 6 years. In-person workshops longer than that. But I love teaching. And I also had a brief stint there where I was doing one-on-one coaching, which for me, it was starting to feel like I was hitting a wall with the amount of impact that I could make, and realizing just the level of impact you can make with online courses, and being able to create the content one time and then give it to hundreds, thousands of people, instead of just spending 1 hour of your time and only being able to access or bring value to that one person and having to do that over and over again. So learning how to kind of scale that in a way and make it bigger, and then also automate that value through online courses.
Awesome. I love everything about what you just said. I feel like we're very alike in that way. But yes, I love it all. Okay. Let's see. Can you kind of walk us through your typical work day? Like, how many hours do you spend painting? How many hours do you spend doing other things?
Yeah, so as of the last 9 months, it looks very differently than before because I had a baby 9 months ago.
Oh, congrats.
And thank you. And I work from home, which is a huge blessing, and I'm super grateful to be working from home. It's just like the constant back and forth juggle. I never feel like I actually get a solid chunk of time to sit down and work because it's either feeding time or nap time or whatever. So I feel like I'm doing bits, like 30-minute chunks of work throughout the day and into the night to get everything done. But I would say throughout the week, I'm probably spending about 5 to 10 hours total painting. And the rest of the time, I'm creating content for my classes, my online courses, for my blog, and I'm actually launching a podcast in January. So I've been batch recording batch recording episodes ahead of time, because you never know, life happens, you're mothering and all this kind of stuff that you're juggling. You might not be able to hit record and come out with stuff that week or whatever. I have a small but mighty team of people who work for me, and I get to, thankfully, spend most of my time painting patterns and whatnot for licensing programs. Like currently I'm doing a job with a baby mat company and with Staples and Target, and so there's a lot involved with those bigger manufacturing licensing program jobs. So there's a lot of painting, a lot of scanning, and a lot of designing and whatnot, and sending files off to design teams and getting them approved. So there's that kind of back and forth. But yeah, a lot of my time is spent, spending about an hour a day painting, and then getting it on my computer and designing it and mocking it up in whatever type of product it needs to be mocked up in, and sending it off to clients, and brainstorming, stuff like that.
Yeah, amazing. I honestly feel like you're just a couple years ahead of what I'm doing. So I have so many questions for you. Even with that, even with having the baby thing, like we're just now, like I'm about to get married and we're talking about it.
Congrats.
And
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I feel like you're just a couple years ahead. And so, okay, with the baby thing, let's just talk about that. So you went from working like 8-hour days, probably, or eight or more hour
Way
days.
More,
okay, same. Okay, did you take some time off after the baby was born, and now you work like how much? Tell me about more.
Yeah, I really wish I would have taken more time off. I really wish I would have. And this is, I guess, word to the why. I don't know what that phrase is.
I'm all ears.
Word of caution to you, if you do you, because every mom's experience is completely different. I don't know how much detail you want, but I had a pretty severe tear after labor, and this is not to scare you. You'll be perfectly fine, blah, blah, blah. But I had a pretty severe tear, and I definitely took on and I was just so naive again, going into motherhood, thinking I would be able to get back to work within a month and it would be totally fine. And the sleep deprivation, sure, that's going to be a problem, but I can work through it, and I just need to get these deadlines done because I got to make that money. And I really wish I would have not done that. And I was basically within the first month after, because my baby was 2 weeks overdue, he was 2 weeks late. So the deadline was even closer to his birthday than I was picturing. Like just everything, all the expectations were thrown out of the window because I thought I was going to be early or on time, and then he ended up being 2 weeks late and whatever. Anyway, so I had about 2 or 3 weeks after I gave birth for this licensing deadline, and it was like probably 8 to 10 pieces that I had to paint, and then I also had to scan them and whatever. So it wasn't like crazy. It wasn't a book deadline like writing. I've written 2 books now, and writing manuscripts and doing the artwork and all of that for a book is a crazy, crazy deadline. But it was still like I had to paint laying down on my couch because I couldn't sit down for the first 2 months, and because of the tear, the owies down there.
Yeah.
And so I really wish I would have taken more time off just to like slowly transform into being a new mom, because you become a completely different person. It's like you're saying goodbye to your old self in a really good way and completely transforming into a new person. And there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to, just work through, and a lot of emotions and physical and all of that kind of stuff. So I really wish I would have taken like 2 or 3 months at least of time off. And before that, like I said, I was working. I mean, there were days where I worked 8-hour days or even less sometimes. But before having a baby, I was definitely like average day amount of time putting in was around 10 to 12 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I could work when I wanted to because I didn't have another human that I had to keep alive. And so now it looks very differently, and I'm super, super grateful because I feel like I'm actually way more efficient now than I was before. Like, I don't know what I did with all the time that I had before I had a baby, because now I feel like, okay, when I sit down or when it's nap time, I go hard and I don't tinker around. I don't like dilly dally or anything. It's just like, it's go time because this is it. This is all you get. So yeah, I wish I would have taken longer. So if that could be my advice to you,
Okay. Yeah.
when you do decide to have kids, if you do, and obviously you're going to get tons of advice because that just happens, and take it as you will, but just go slow and let yourself kind of ease into motherhood, because it's a crazy time and it's a really beautiful time. The first few months are difficult and crazy, but they're wonderful and amazing as well. So I've definitely learned a lot in the past 9 months and have adjusted how I work and how efficiently I work. And yeah, pretty insane.
Awesome. I love every bit of what you just said. Thank you so much for sharing that. It does, it just it shines a light on, because a lot of people are like, yeah, they work and they have kids and stuff, but I'm like, but it's different in the art field. So especially when you work for
Hmm.
yourself and you work at home. Do you have him at home with you all the time?
My baby? Yeah.
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 Yeah. My mom comes up like 2 to 3 days a week sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, she hasn't for a couple weeks now, and I'm like, ma'am. No. But yeah, so yeah, he's here. My husband works for me too, so he's basically the stay-at-home dad, amazing dude. He's super supportive and helpful. Otherwise, I would have to do some sort of childcare or have somebody, a full-time nanny, because there's no way I could do both. There's no way. And that's another thing too, is like you have to learn. I'm really bad at asking for help. I'm really bad at it. And I think that in a way is a good thing as a business owner, but also it can be really detrimental and hurt you in the long run, because aka pride and not being able to ask for help. But it kind of, being a mom and a business owner at the same time, forces you to do that. Otherwise, things don't get done and bills don't get paid. So
Yeah.
I've had to ask my mom or John or both can you please take the baby for a couple hours, or can you put him to bed or whatever, because I have this deadline or whatever it is. So he is home with me, and so is John, my husband, which is absolutely necessary without a nanny.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned you have a small but mighty team. So it's you and your husband. Do you have anybody else
Hmm.
working for you? I currently have a VA, and I'm just kind of
Hmm.
like wondering about the next hiring process and what to do. So any advice on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a VA too. She's wonderful. Her name's Kelly. She actually just started with me probably 2 months ago. I had it last year before I had Miles, our son. I had an office that wasn't in our home, and I had an assistant and a junior designer working for me at my office. And I actually way prefer having a virtual assistant than having to like show up and be on all the time and making sure I'm like having something for them to do when we arrive to the office. So my VA is 3 hours ahead of me. She's on the East Coast. I'm in California, and so I feel like when I wake up in the morning, one of the first things I do is check my email, and it's just so nice having somebody that's a time zone or a couple of time zones ahead of me because she's already like flushed through the inbox and it's like narrowed down and just only the things that I need to attend to and answer are in there for me, which is so, so nice and relieving because I would wake up before that and just be like, oh, there's so much in my inbox. It's overwhelming. So she's my virtual assistant. And then John does my YouTube channel. He does all my video stuff. He's my videographer. And he is also editing all my podcast episodes. And then I have a marketing team that I have Facebook ad person and then an email marketing person because with launches and online courses and whatnot, there's a ton of back-end stuff that's going on with email marketing and with Facebook ads and Instagram ads and whatnot. And then the random 1099 commissioned people like photos and web developer guys and stuff. So,
Awesome. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I would say for you, if you were looking to it for a next hire, I would look into a marketing agency with your podcast and Facebook situation if you don't already do that, because it's been really helpful for me.
yeah, I might get a suggestion of which one you use and just kind of
Yeah,
go from there.
yeah,
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll email you.
yeah.
Let's see. Can you talk us through your painting process? So you do mostly watercolor?
I do mostly watercolor. Yeah, actually, I only paint with watercolor, and then I do calligraphy and ink illustrative stuff randomly. Most of my work though is watercolor, or at least that's what I get hired for these days. But yeah, I paint mostly. I get the most requests for like abstracts and floral and loose style, so nothing super realistic, although I really, really like painting more realistically, like florals and even portraits sometimes. But I just don't get hired to do it anymore because it's not something that's trending right now in office supplies, which is the majority of the manufacturing I do is in office supplies.
Huh. Who would have
So
thought?
I know, random patterns and watercolor art for planners and notebooks and that sort of thing. It depends on the direction that I get from the client. Usually if it's like, for example, I work with a manufacturer called Blue Sky for a couple different programs. And they usually will give me direction like this is going to be, for example, sold in Staples, and the Staples buyer really likes purple. Like that's just the color that they really like or whatever. And we need it to be more cool colors, more cool tones. We need a couple samples of like abstract and pattern paintings, geometrics, maybe throw in like some cute animal pattern and some floral. And so they'll pull from a bunch of samples that I send them. Usually the first initial like drop of assets that I give them is like over 30-ish paintings. And then we kind of tweak things from there. But when I'm sitting down to paint, it's usually with some sort of design direction. And the design direction is usually projected because in licensing, most retailers and manufacturers are projecting trends 2 years out. And so they're trying to, see what's trending in high-end markets and then kind of coming to the artist and saying, like, we want to see this in a more, not low end, but something more accessible to the average consumer, like a Target or a Staples, and rolling out in a couple years. And so we'll kind of take that direction, and I'll just provide a few different options for each request. But if I'm like painting for myself or painting for like an online class or something, I gravitate towards floral. My mom's an avid gardener, and so I grew up around flowers and I just know them really well. I've studied the shape a lot of flowers, and yeah, so I just bust open my palette. I've got my favorite brushes, 2 cups of water, and my favorite paper, and I just kind of go to town. a lot of stuff ends up in the trash, but something sticks eventually. Um, and that's usually the one that I scan and send off to manufacturer or whoever the client is.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. Just hearing everything about what you're talking about, because I know I do murals mostly, so hardly any licensing or anything. It's just
Hmm.
so interesting every bit of what you're saying. It makes me want to buy your course actually, if that's ever a way I want to go down.
Yeah.
But yeah, just how people like look at the high end and how it kind of like comes down to the
Hmm.
more accessible end. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's so smart.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
fun stuff.
Is there a thing you don't like to paint without?
My size 6 Princeton Heritage 4050 brush is
Oh,
fine.
okay, specific. I like
Very
it.
specific. I love this brush. If I was like stranded on a deserted island and could only take one art supply, it would be this brush. I love
Amazing. I love it. I love how specific that is.
it.
Um,
Yeah.
are there any art lessons you've learned the hard way?
Um, well, I've made a lot of terrible art. I've made a lot of terrible art, and every artist has. But like actual mistakes that I've felt have been in my wedding stationery days when I was designing custom wedding stationery for clients. I've definitely had the handful of jobs where I either forgot to spell check or and the client also missed it, or like I ordered the wrong plate for the letterpress artwork, or did the wrong ink color stuff, or ordered the wrong paper, stuff like that. So there's those mistakes are definitely more like they stick out in my brain more because they hurt more because there was a client involved and it involved like eating costs on paper and letterpress costs and stuff like that, or printing costs. So yeah, there's definitely been those types of mistakes. Yeah, anything that's like painting related or just like in the moment doing artwork type of mistakes. There's been a lot of them. There's definitely been a lot of like, why isn't this turning out? Or that color's so terrible, or whatever, it's not working, and it's frustrating. But I've just, you just gotta throw it in the trash, start over, or take a
Yeah.
moment to breathe. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely the mistakes that I've made in past. I don't do wedding stationery anymore, mainly because it's just not my cup of tea. But yeah, there's been like printing errors and eating costs and ordering this or that wrong thing, and it just hurts.
For sure, yeah. And I feel like every artist that I ask that to, they have the same look that you did. They're like, "Oh, which mistake?"
Yeah,
Like we all make so many because
so many.
there's no like roadmap for artists, and
Hmm.
like do this, don't do that. But yeah, that's awesome. It also just makes you kind of human too. Whereas a lot of the artists that are in this group, they're aspiring and they're just in the beginning, and so they see more established artists like yourself, and they're like, "Oh, I bet
Hmm.
they do everything right." So it really makes you human and grounding just hearing
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you guys make mistakes, so that when we make a mistake or when they make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Just knowing
Right.
that other people are doing it too.
Exactly. I don't even know how artists do it these days, and more power to you if you're just starting out and you're starting a business. Because when I was starting, social media was, I mean, it was a thing. It was, just like very terrible filters and people showing photos of their dog, and it wasn't used like the tool of advertising and business and art and creativity that it is now. And it's a machine. It's like a beast, and the comparison and just like feeling trapped in that beginner phase while you're looking at all these people, when you're just seeing that little square of like a snapshot of where they are at in the middle of their career, or 8 years into their career or whatever. It's just not fair to beginners, and it would be so hard to turn off. But I hope that it can be a reminder too, that like, because I've kept all my old artwork and all my old Instagram photos from 8 years ago when I first started on my Instagram. So if anybody watching has time on their hands, you should scroll really, really far back on my Instagram, and you'll see some really terrible artwork. I promise you, it was there. And you're just looking 8 years into my career and practice. So
Yes.
anyway.
I love that you emphasize that, because you said 8 years in the beginning when we first started this interview. You said you started Instagram 8 years ago, and I was like, did she just say 8 years? Oh my gosh, that's amazing
Yeah.
that you started out that early and have built it
Hmm.
to be what it is now.
Yes.
Because if anybody looks at your account now, you're nearing 200,000 followers, and that
Hmm.
can be daunting. You're like, oh my gosh, but just hearing you say, yes, I started this 8 years ago. And you can
Yeah.
get here too in 8 years, you know, like it just takes
Yeah.
consistency. I think that's a great reminder.
Yes, takes consistency for sure. And 8 years ago, I quit my job after 4 months of being at that financial planning office. I quit my job when I was under 1,000 followers on Instagram. Like, I don't know why Instagram got all this credit of being like, once you have this amount of followers and this huge audience, then you can quit your job. It's like, I don't know why that's like it's not a requirement for everybody, but it's kind of this weird mindset that people have that, oh, I don't have an audience, so therefore I can't be a professional artist or anything. But it's really not one and the same. You can have a very thriving business without an audience and vice versa.
For sure.
So anyway,
Yeah, for sure. So what are your future art plans and goals? What are your upcoming projects? Anything in the works?
yes, always something in the works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have I have a course launch coming up in December, which is all about education and teaching and how to teach art. So in-person workshops and online courses. And so that's launching in December. And then I also have my podcast, like I was saying, which is launching in January, which is all going to be like creative business type advice and stories of my own failures and mistakes and successes, so that hopefully people who are listening can resonate with them, but also learn from them. What else do I have going on? A bunch of licensing programs that are constantly in the works. I have collection coming out, like I said earlier, with Staples this coming year, in office supplies, obviously, Staples, and then Target the next year, and a few other random bits and bobs, bits
Yeah.
and bobs.
Those are some big names. Congrats. That's so
Oh,
cool.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I feel like this happens to a lot of artists where they are approached by a brand and ask like, what's your fee for this or that? We would love to use your artwork on t-shirts or mugs or whatever. And that initial question of like, what would you charge? To have your art on this t-shirt forever and be sold this amount of times or whatever is so overwhelming and very, very confusing. And so yeah, I hired an agent when I first was approached by a yoga towel company. Oh, it's doing the weird thing again. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And the weird echo again. But anyway, I hired an agent. This was 2 years ago, I think, when the
Okay.
yoga towel
Smart.
company asked me, and she's been amazing for getting me these bigger named manufacturers and retail jobs, because she's been in the industry for over 20 years, and so she has a lot of great relationships with these manufacturers. And so on my own, I probably wouldn't have been able to get these jobs. And so having an agent was really, really useful. And she actually teamed up with me and is the co-instructor for my course Brand Plus Brand. Yeah, so she is the co-instructor with me on that, and we talk all about licensing and working in products and with brands and stuff. Yeah,
Very cool. I
so
love
that's
it.
what's upcoming.
Yeah, so many fun things. Um,
Yes.
so last question, and I will let you go for the night. Is there any advice that you give artists who want to make art their full-time career, but don't know where to start? Like, what's a good starting point for aspiring artists?
I know this is going to sound super annoying and people are going to eye roll, but you just have to freaking start.
Yeah.
You just have to start. I feel like with art, especially in the creative industry and with artists, there's a lot of like, I need to perfect this. And there's a lot of like identity that's wound up in what they're creating. And I totally get that. And I had that as well in the beginning, especially after I'd made the plunge and people were starting to hire me. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I don't deserve to be here. Total imposter syndrome started creeping in. And I'm not qualified for this. I don't have a degree. I don't have any business savvy. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I should be charging for this. And there's so many things that even 8 years into it, I still have questions and I still have hangups of like, do I deserve to be talking about this? Do I deserve to have this job with this manufacturer? Do I, it never goes away. That imposter syndrome of like, should I be doing this? I don't know if I should be doing this. And so when it comes to just starting in terms of like pursuing art as a career, you just have to start and ignore those voices. They still happen no matter if you're 8 years into your career or 4 or 14, whatever it is, they're still there. They just soften over time and get quieter.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what I would say. That's my piece of advice. I know that people might eye roll and might be like, but I still need to know where to start.
Yeah.
And obviously there's the practical answers, like decide if you want to work with clients or if you want to work in products and what your business name is going to be and register your trademark and all that kind of practical stuff. And I have some info on my blog if you really want to get practical. But yeah, start with what you know and what you're really, really, truly obsessed with and you love, and it'll just kind of snowball from there. And people will gravitate towards, if you're obsessed and you're in love with something that you create and you're just obsessed with it, people will gravitate towards that because that's you being genuinely you. And so that will just emulate through everything you talk about on Instagram, on social media, through your emails or your website, whatever. If you're truly obsessed and proud of what you create, then that will just kind of seep out of you and people will gravitate towards that and want to work with you. So that's
So
my
true.
advice.
So true. No, it's so good too. And it really is just like some people just need the push to start doing it. And just like you said, I think a lot of people will try to make art for people that they think that they want to buy instead of really being like, okay, what do I really want to do? Whereas there is a middle ground in that. But yeah,
For sure.
I think that's awesome advice. Thank you so much for coming on here and talking with me. I'm so excited to just virtually meet you. I've followed you
Me
on
too.
Instagram for the last couple months, but every post I'm like, yeah, I get her. Like that's so cool.
That's so
But
awesome. I love
yeah.
this conversation. Thanks for bearing with all of the technology
Yeah,
hiccups
yeah.
on my
We're
end.
we're used to it with Facebook. So but yeah, this will be put into a podcast and it'll air next Tuesday and I'll send you the link.
Very cool.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on here and everybody's on here saying thank you and
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
So yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, have a good night. We'll see you. Oh,
You
actually,
too.
one second.
Yes.
Your website. You want to just let them know your
Oh,
website and
yeah.
Instagram?
Yeah, it's both are just Jenna Rainey. So Jenna and then Rainey is spelled Rainey. So jennarainey.com and then at Jenna Rainey for Instagram.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.